The Arrowverse was DC's response to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or so it seems, and the most popular show from its catalog was undoubtedly The Flash, which aired on the CW from 2014 to 2023. The series starred the titular character, the Flash, who was portrayed by Grant Gustin, who, might I add, gave a fantastic performance. The Flash, also known as Barry Allen, was a crime scene investigator who found himself with superpowers after a particle accelerator explosion. If you've not watched the show yet, I do recommend it, even if the later seasons drag on a bit. Regardless, we're here to discuss a major retcon that I feel is heavily responsible for the flaws of the later seasons. This retcon is so major, in fact, that it invalidates the twist and stinger at the end of the show's pilot. On October 7th, 2014, The Flash premiered on the CW, introducing the audience of Arrow and newcomers to Barry Allen. At the end of the episode, it is revealed in a newspaper dated April 25th, 2024, that the Flash would vanish in some form of crisis that involved red skies. The newspaper would appear numerous times in the early seasons of the show, with it being revealed that in the build-up to the Flash's disappearance, he had partaken in a street fight with the Reverse Flash, his nemesis. This seems like it would be the big conclusion of the show, right? Like, this is what it's building toward, especially, because it was teased in the pilot. But that's where things get a little interesting and a little weird and a little frustrating and sad. In the Arrowverse's 2018 Elseworlds crossover, a sort of deity known as the Monitor, who you might know from the comics, made a deal with Arrow's titular Green Arrow to spare the life of both the Flash and Supergirl by giving his own. While he doesn't die in this crossover, the other two do survive the events of the crossover, with the deal essentially becoming a ticking time bomb. At the end of the crossover, it is teased that the following year the Arrowverse will be tackling DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, which, if you're not familiar with that, that is essentially a comic run where the DC multiverse kind of converges. The whole idea is all the different, DC timelines all come together into one as the entire multiverse is destroyed, and it's all, the whole world is rebuilt with everyone on one Earth. Kind of, that's the concept. Later in this same season of The Flash, though, another newspaper article is revealed. This one is titled, 25 Years Later, The Flash is Still Missing, which reveals that The Flash would seemingly never return. Why they bothered with this newspaper is kind of beyond me, as the whole thing gets retconned the very next season, but Uh, at the end of season 5, Reverse Flash teases their next encounter, stating,
"See you in our next crisis."
and the newspaper is altered to now be dated in 2019, which happens to coincide with the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover event. I wonder. The first half of the next season of The Flash uh, is spent basically building up to the crisis in the Flash's disappearance in said crisis. Going so far as to have episodes titled stuff like Dead Man Running, basically, it's a ticking time bomb. He's not going to make it. So, going so far, in fact, might I add, in trying to build up to this crisis, they had Barry essentially Doctor Strange himself into the future to see, like, all these alternate possibilities. The whole idea being that, like, oh, can I find some sort of positive outcome for this? And every single universe, every single possible future where everyone survives, he does not. So that's kind of his whole thing. This, breaks him. He realizes the only possible outcome, he has to perish in this crisis. He has to vanish. So obviously, after 6 seasons of build-up, that's the outcome, right? Like, that's obvious. That's the obvious outcome. That crisis is going to come. Barry will meet with the Reverse Flash. They'll fight, and they'll both vanish. Well, that's what we were led to believe. In fact, the Reverse Flash doesn't even show up once in the crossover event. The Flash doesn't vanish either. Instead, a situation's presented where basically this magical treadmill is slowing down the end of the universe, and someone fast enough needs to run on the treadmill to save everyone. Of course, if you run on the treadmill so fast that you're essentially saving everyone by kind of pausing the destruction of the universe, yeah, you yourself are going to perish for going so fast. Yada yada. Uh, so, of course, Barry Allen in the crossover volunteers to be the guy to go on the treadmill. Um, and in a very bizarre twist, the Flash from the 1990 Flash series is actually the Flash to sacrifice himself, and he is the one to vanish in the crisis. Even though all the newspapers exist, and it's a very messy retcon, but it's easy to retcon it because they then created a new timeline afterward thanks to Crisis. Despite, you know, now that they've retconned it, it's wonderful. The Flash is going to survive, even though that's the thing they've been building towards since the very first episode. We're only halfway through the sixth season, so maybe the show's ending soon, right? No, it goes 9 seasons in total. There was no clear direction for the series at that point because the initial hook of the series was retcon, so the writers just kind of had to improvise. Um, and they did some fun things here and there. They introduced a bunch of new forces of nature and like did some fun stuff with that, even though some of it got a little weird at times. But it had ups and downs, but there was very clearly not like an end goal in mind. In fact, even the season 8 finale was filmed to be kind of an alternate finale if the show got canceled, and it did not really fulfill anything that people were expecting, from the end of the show. uh, but curiously, the show was then renewed for a ninth season where the Flash and Reverse Flash battle would actually happen a few episodes prior to the series finale. Um, but of course, with the slight change that, there was no crisis with Red Skies because that was already handled in a crossover 4 years earlier. And while I did particularly enjoy the eighth season because it had a fun little story event at the start that had a bit of a crossover with Black Lightning and Batwoman and all of that, I felt and I also felt the big confrontation near the end of the ninth season was pretty good. Like, I think that the whole Reverse Flash and Flash battle that was teased, it was worth the wait. It was a solid interpretation of it, even though it's not what was originally intended. But I can't help but feel disappointed that the stinger of the show's pilot never came to be. Like they had even started setting up a, potential successor to Barry Allen in Wally West. And they easily could have gone that angle. I mean, obviously, it's a whole show popularity thing, changing the lead, but like they had started building towards it. Regardless of all of this, if you watched the show as it was airing, tell me what you think in the comments. Were you disappointed with what happened with the Crisis crossover? I still think it's so bizarre to this day that the Reverse Flash doesn't show up once, especially when just a few episodes prior to it's like, see you in our next Crisis. But tell me what you think. Um, I still really enjoy the show, as as a whole thing, and the Arrowverse means a lot to me, and I'm sad that it's over. But that's what I've got to say about that. I'd also appreciate if you leave a like on the video. It helps the channel out a lot. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice day.